All right, so we'll call the meeting to order.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to give a roll call for the board members.
Mr. Hartline.
Present.
Mr. Frederickson.
Present.
Mr. Present.
Excellent.
Mr. Morton is absent.
Approval of the agenda,
Motion to approve the
May 15th
agenda.
agenda.
Second.
All right.
Motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Second.
All right. Very svelte, very quickly there. Right?
Efficient. I have 2 more clients
Training.
today.
And we get to these guys.
And another move. 5:30? Yeah.
So, as I shared, to some extent in the weekly board update, last Friday, and Mr. Hartwine and I discussed, today, we had talked about the 2017 refinance when we completed the last refinance in the last fall. We're also looking at the 2018 bonds that are going to be coming due. And we're going to look to try to, from a resolution side, clear the deck and get that stuff taken care of for both of these. The 2017 is something that we think we'll be able to do in September, or complete in September. The 2018 would be, I think, in February. Is that the date given? The team is here to review that with us. We will meet at our next finance committee meeting just to approve sort of the resolution going forward. And we'll seek to have that approved by the board on the 27th, the last board meeting of the school year, so that we can be actively working through this in the summertime. Okay, so I turn it over to Tim and to Garrett.
Well, great. Well, thanks again for being here. Just as a refresher, so Garrett Moore, PFM, your financial advisor, and then Tim Kerr with PNC, the underwriter. So this right here, accompanied with Eckert Siemens, Bill Benzing, is kind of the financing team. And Tom, I think you did a great job laying the groundwork. So really kind of like what we discussed last year, this plan, if you will, is really just a copy and paste from last year. So the numbers might not be quite as big. Last year you saved about $4.1 million over the life. We're not talking about saving quite that much, unfortunately, with this issue, but as we'll get to in a little bit, still meaningful savings, right around the $500,000 to $1 million range. So with that, Tim, if you want to give a little bit of color on recent market movements.
And just, I think, those, I think they're still big numbers, right? When you combine them together, it's probably over $1 million in savings on top of the 4.1 million that we just saved, right? Which is wonderful. And I think the math is about $40,000, $40,000 to $50,000 a year in
Debt service reduction.
Service reduction. Thank you. Right. So I think we add those up, that could be another $100,000 in debt service reduction, which has been of recent our goal, right? We're trying to reduce that number. Okay. Back to you.
So on page 2 here, Garrett has put together different charts as it relates to kind of how the municipal market has moved of late. I don't think this is going to be a shock to anybody, but the financial markets have been a little bit volatile recently. We all know it as it relates to different policies as they've been presented, kind of shocking the system a little bit. But good things are, the markets have kind of stabilized here, the kind of tariff policies have rolled back or paused, which has given the markets, they kind of calm them, come back in line. And then 2, the other benefit is we're not doing this right now. We're going to be doing this in September, which has the benefit of the markets, both the federal and the municipal markets are predicting at least 2 Federal Reserve rate cuts this year. The first one is most likely going to occur in June, with the second one being probably around the time where we price, if not in December time. So we should have the benefit of at least 1 rate cut, and a rate cut in theory would increase the savings because we would be moving to lower rates that we'd be refinancing at. So hopefully we get a rate cut and we see that kind of flow through to the municipal market. But the grand takeaway is the volatility has subsided for now, and we're kind of moving back into a sort of normalized environment.
And I think the takeaway too, I'm just looking at the bottom graph, the bottom graph goes back to January of 24. So that would encapsulate the rates when we locked in the funding last year. While as rates as of today are slightly higher than where we locked rates in last year, they're still in the same ballpark. We're not in the 6.5% range like you would see with a mortgage, for instance. We're still in the same threshold that we were at last year.
What did we refinance last year? What was our rate that we ended up? 3 and some light change?
It's in the area, I don't.
Yeah,
know
it's-
for sure.
I know we didn't bottom out at like 2.5. I know we also didn't hit the 3.8s or anything like that. I think we were kind of around 3.31 or
I was
something.
gonna say 3.34 kind of sticks out in my mind, but
Okay.
hopping in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
But we can go back and look at that.
Yeah.
and send out an email just to confirm. But nonetheless, with this transaction, it will be kind of a copy and paste from last year. So jumping to page 3, kind of already talked about the top section. So last year we financed the Series A and B of 2016. This year we would be looking at the Series A, B, and D of 2017 bonds. And like I said, just like last year, with this refinancing, all we're doing is going from a higher interest rate to a lower interest rate, generating savings. We're not restructuring any debt. We're not extending any debt. We're not, contributing any district cash towards this refinancing. It's simply going from a higher rate to a lower rate. The section that you see in the middle is just kind of a high-level summary of the 3 bonds that are outstanding. So, all, in the $4, $8, $9 million range, all of them have call dates in December of this year, and then all of them have 5% coupons on them. So again, going from a higher rate to a lower rate, and at a high level, what we'll see on the next page is based off of some conservative market rates as of today, the district would look to be generating around $600,000 of savings. We'll get into kind of what those savings look like on subsequent pages.
And that's without extending the terms.
Yes, sir, correct. We're just going from the higher rate to the lower rate, nothing goofy, squirrely, nothing like that.
So we're looking at 2 that mature in 2018, which will be coming off of our balance sheet then?
2028.
2028. Oh, yeah, 2028.
Yes, the
2028.
final maturity.
Yeah. So they're only 3 years out.
Correct.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
The other thing to note is that it's in here, but we're not discussing it in this sheet. But when Eckert comes, your bond counsel comes at the next meeting, they'll also have a resolution on the parameters for the 2018 bonds,
Okay.
which we talked about they'd be done next year, but it's just, for simplicity's sake, we pass all the resolutions all at once.
And we did check already to make sure that we could do that, and we can.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So, and as part of that resolution, one of the parameters, if you will, for both these 17 bonds that we're looking to refinance and the 18 bonds that we're looking to refinance next year would be a minimum savings target. So put bluntly, the parameters would outline all the kind of framework in which we, the financing team, needs to work within, one of which being the minimum savings amount. So basically it's the board's formal direction to only execute the refinancing if you meet those savings requirements. So it's not a blanket approval to just go and issue bonds whenever the financing team feels like it. Rather, we would only be able to go out and execute a refinancing if those parameters are met. Page 4, again, is just a summary of all of the district's existing debt as it stands today. So if you look in the bottom half, if you look in columns 13, 14, and 16, those are the bonds that we'd be looking to refinance with this issuance. As you'll note, one of the reasons why we're not including the Series C of 2017 bonds is because, frankly, they're already paid off. There's no principal outstanding, so we're not able to refinance them, of course. And then column 17 is the series of 2018 bonds that, again, we would be looking to take out, in the spring, early February, March timeframe of next year. Page 5 is really, frankly, the money page, if you will. So starting from the top and working down, This financing would be about $22 to $22.5 million. And again, that would be refinancing the 17 A, B, and D bonds. You can see the principal amounts that we'd be refinancing up top. And then again, the estimated annual savings or the estimated total savings over the life is about $600,000. And again, to Tom's point, similar to last year, the goal being take those savings kind of over the life so that we're kind of permanently lowering the district's debt service line item in its budget. So when you look in column 4, you can see that the $600,000 a year equates to about $40,000 to $50,000 annually. And again, that's just with this 17 refinancing. It doesn't include the proposed 2018 refinancing that would occur next year. So again, and you know, kind of between us in this room, right, this $600,000 savings is conservative as of today because we know we have a few months before we can ultimately lock in rates. And if recent events have shown us anything, it's that markets can be relatively volatile for even the seemingly the smallest of reasons. So again, if we were to be able to go and refinance them today, these savings might be closer to $700,000, $800,000, $900,000. But again, knowing that we have some time before we can get there, we wanted to leave a little bit of conservatism in these rates.
You know what the rate is or thereabouts that you've used?
This is probably
on that?
this is probably about 4.25, 4.5 range. The benefit is, and this is kind of a testament to the district, is your total debt outstanding is relatively short. If you look in column 3, your debt is completely paid off really in 13 years from now.
Right.
Which, you know, when you compare that to other districts across the state, you know, some districts have debt that goes out 30 years. So, you know, when they're looking to do any sort of refinancing or new money issuances, they really have to go out long. The fact that this refinancing that we're contemplating here is, you know, 13 years long, that's kind of the sweet spot for rates. You know, when you start going out much longer, the rates start getting up there, spending up more interest, and you really start losing some efficiencies. So it's, again, testament to you all, testament to the districts for, you know, keeping your debt kind of portfolio on the shorter side.
When we pay off that last one, the Series C from 2017, what type of effect is that going to have on our overall budget? You know, Tom?
I think it's very good. I think all these things are balanced, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
as they go through and move numbers back and forth, right, and allocate the funds,
Yeah.
the impact isn't felt right away.
Right, but I'm saying, so we pay off the number 4 in the column, we pay that
Yeah.
1.5 million off. I mean, what's that going to equate to savings, you know, that we see an adjustment in our budget for?
I will
Just,
get
yeah,
that to you.
it just,
I
yeah.
don't- It probably won't be much.
I don't think it's
When I
much,
looked at it, right, and I remember when I was early here, you know, these
Yeah.
guys were, you know, under their wing,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, in fact, I'll be done, right? And I looked at the next page and it was still the same amount, right? My debt service didn't change.
That's the thing, I mean, it's, you know, 1.5 million of 133 million, so we're
I
not
think
talking
that's
significant, but
what they're, as sort of a rule, right?
Yeah.
To learn, right? You've gotta manage that, right?
Right,
We we can't do things that are going to upset the equilibrium.
I say, and that's why we have that debt service fund to kind of equal out those, so that we can
Yes.
smooth out what we're paying every year, and,
Right,
yeah.
so,
It may be helpful to look at column 11 or column 22, because that's
Yeah.
what we call the aggregate debt service.
Okay.
And that's kind of, the 17 Cs is just
Right.
a part of the puzzle.
Okay.
And so you kind of can look in 11 or
the
22.
number's not really changing.
Right, it's all
Right.
equal. So like
10
the,
million, 4 and change.
right, exactly. We take the other pieces of the puzzle and wrap it around so that the column 11 or 22 is all one sort of steady stream, and you can kind of budget accordingly.
When we did the refinance, we saw that number would have dropped.
Yes.
So
Right.
there was
Right.
true impact to our debt service, right? But again,
Right.
it's these guys smoothing that transition
Exactly.
down the line.
Yeah, I mean, well, you look at, you know, 6 of 26, it's 10.4 versus 5 or 9.5, 9.6, so that's a decent amount
Yeah, so the column 22, that's what's called your local effort, because
Right.
you do get money from the state,
Okay,
and that,
So that's netting.
right, we're taking out what money you're getting, because obviously you're not really.
there we go, okay,
That's
Paying
four
the
numbers,
10-4.
these are the numbers we're paying.
right, okay,
So from a budget perspective, Tom, I'm jumping into your
Yes,
world
yeah,
here, you're
yeah,
probably
that's it.
budgeting on the expense side,
Correct.
column 11,
Yes.
and then on the revenue side, you're budgeting that difference
That
coming in.
coming in from the state is up, okay,
So the net effect is really column 22.
Right.
all right,
And frankly, that whole level structure that you see in pick one, column 11 or 22 is a stipulation of the state. The state requires any municipal issuers, whether it's a school district, a borough, a township, city, county, whatever, to have what they call level or declining debt service, so that no issuer gets themselves in trouble because they have, a debt service that goes like this, and then up, and then down, and then up, and then down. So that's why it's at that level state. Jumping to page 6, really just talking timeline here. Obviously, we're here today to give you all an update on 17 refinancings, as well as we'll touch a little bit on the next page on the 18 refinancings that we'll do next year. And then I think, as Tom had mentioned, Eckert Siemens, your bond counsel, would be here. Jumping ahead. The authorization to proceed would occur at your June 12th meeting. That would just give the financing team kind of the informal thumbs up to begin drafting all the necessary documents. And then ultimately, your bond counsel would be coming back on the June 24th meeting of the whole to present for your consideration the parameters resolutions for, again, both the 17 and the 18 refinancings. As you may recall from last year, when we provide the parameters schedules to you, you're approving an amount, the maximum amount. So if you go back to page 5, if we really think that the total principal amount for this financing that we're talking about for the 17s is 22.5 million, realistically, that parameter schedule that you see is going to be for some amount more than that. And that's just a requirement of the state that we need to abide by, that we need to provide both in aggregate and annually a maximum not to exceed amount. So the number that you see in mid-June is going to be, at least for the 17 bonds, it's probably going to be closer to 26 million, 25 or 26 million. But again, it'll still have that minimum savings requirement in there. So assuming that all goes fine at the committee of the whole meeting on the 24th, we would get to work on the information request and the official statement or preliminary official statement, and get to work on the credit rating process, things of that nature, and ultimately be targeting a mid-August pricing. That would be the date, as you might recall, when we would actually lock in the rates. And then ultimately settlement would occur about a month later. So really, from kind of the board's perspective, the June 24th meeting where you're considering the parameters, and then mid-August, kind of the two important key dates, because that's what authorizes us to move forward with the financing upon meeting certain tests, and then ultimately when we would be locking in the rates.
So the August pricing is locking in the rates.
Right. They wouldn't move, the whole world could end,
Yeah.
your rates are not moving as of the day that we price and sign the bond purchase agreement.
And that's when Tom will send you our nifty little bond sale document, which will have your final interest rates, savings amounts, et cetera, et cetera. That's really the meat of our presentation. Pages 7 and 8 are just what the 2018 refinancing would look like. So if you look on page 8 in column 4, similar to the 17 refinancing, with this one we would be looking to potentially generate $40,000 to $50,000 additional per year in savings, albeit issuing a much lower amount. So instead of issuing 20 some odd $1 million, we're in the $9 million range. And that's really because, unlike with the 16 bonds that we refinanced last year, 17 bonds that we're here talking about today, there's only one series of bonds that we're refunding. It's the 2018 bonds. It's not the 18 A, B, C, D, E, F, G bonds. So again, to Tom's point, when we get to, springtime of 2018, hopefully we're able to lock in these rates and generate, hopefully more savings than what we're showing you here. When you look back, when you all look back at the 16 refunding, the 17 refunding, and the 18 refunding, those are going to be some meaningful amounts that the district has been able to save over the last 3 years, and hopefully, that'll be a nice reflection in the budget.
Are the 18 bonds at a higher rate than what? So like we look at the 17, because I'm looking at it, I'm saying it's half as much, but the savings is 3 times as much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
18 bonds do have a slightly higher interest rate with them,
Okay.
and they're longer.
Assuming a different rate that they would, the rate assumed, is it also this 4.25 to 4.5? Or are you
Correct.
assuming a lower rate?
Could be better.
No, we're still assuming kind of current rates as of today, so that's,
Got it.
4.25, 4.5% rate. Just obviously the 18s, there's a little bit more what we call interest rate risk, right? Because there's more time between today and when we're ultimately able to lock in rates on that one, which is, February.
But it could also work in our
Oh,
favor.
absolutely. And again, I think that's the whole kind of point when we talk about the 18 bonds is let's kind of lay the groundwork here today to be able to execute the 2018 bonds. And when I say lay the groundwork, having this discussion, having the board approve the parameters, which includes the 2018 refinancing, and then frankly, January timeframe, if not December timeframe, we're going to be reaching out to Tom as kind of a team here and saying, hey, Tom, based off of what we're seeing here today, full speed ahead. Or we'll be saying, gee, the market's really gone to hell in a handbasket. We think we need to just pump the brakes a little bit, wait to see what the market looks like over the next month, 2 months, 3 months before we start gearing up to do anything. Because the last thing any of us want to do is start sending Tom a litany of work to do or information requests and start the credit rating process just to hit the pause button or hit the stop button because the market has gone haywire.
Is there any historical evidence that a particular time during the year is better to do this? In other words, like are rates lower in February than they might be in June? Or is it, I know there's so many, everything's in turmoil now.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking historically, is there any time of the year that's better to do this? Or it just depends on market conditions completely?
There are periods of time that you historically expect to see flows come in, especially in the municipal market. It's called reinvestment periods, where old bonds mature, and then these institutional entities have now they have cash and they need to reinvest that.
Okay.
So we're actually coming up on one. It's called the June-July reinvestment period. So a lot of entities will have June or July interest payments, or that's where they mature. So now all these funds are available and they bring them back to work. It also happens at the beginning of the year.
That may work to our
It
benefit.
may work to the
If there's a flood of cash in the market, they're looking for it, we're gonna get better bids.
The
So,
one thing I will say, if you look, I'm going to jump around a little bit just to pinpoint things. On page 4, column 17 at the bottom where it says call date. So this is a call date for the 18 bond specifically. You see it's June 15th of 2026.
Mhm.
If you might recall, when we do a refinancing, in order to be compliant kind of with all the federal statutes, we can only settle on a refinancing 90 days or 3 months before the call date.
okay,
So that's why when you look at the summary page on page 8, we're assuming a settlement of March of 26. So that's the earliest date in which we can settle on a refinancing. So to your point, we can certainly wait to do a refinancing, but we can't accelerate that any sooner. So one of the reinvestment periods, right, is in January, right? Banks are typically closing their books, December, late December, and then kind of reopen them for business, paraphrasing, for lack of a better word, in January. We would not be able to price in January or settle in January because we're locked in at that
Limited
90
to-
days.
right. Okay.
And it's 90 days to settle,
Correct.
Yeah.
not to lock it.
And it takes about a month from pricing to settlement date to, get the paperwork together, do all the legal documents, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we're able to price in February. Like the earliest we could go would be in February to lock in the rate, because then it takes a month to settle, which is our 90-day window.
Okay.
Okay.
And the parameters that bond counsel is going to come back with, that provides us, one of the great things about it is it provides us flexibility. We could, and we saw it, a month ago when the turmoil hit, that like there was plenty of issuers that were under parameters that were going to go to market that week. Everything became volatile, and they said, well, we don't want to do this. So that parameters gave them flexibility to look at the market and say, nope, not today. And then they came back, a week or two later when everything calmed down, and they were able to successfully price. So
The parameters in this market have really proven their worth. When you have a stable market like we have for the previous few years, where it's just, little fluctuations every week, they still prove their value, but it's less apparent than when you have these really volatile markets, or in the case of early April when there was no market.
right.
There was about 7 to 10 days where nobody, if they had the choice, nobody was entering the market. So people who had parameters then were able to access the market immediately when it reopened, as opposed to if you didn't have a parameters and you were planning on pricing on April 5th, well, gee, we can't price April 5th because there's nobody in the market. So now we have to wait another month, to the next board meeting before we can actually price.
Is the federal rate having a bigger impact right now than it was? Because it seemed like there was little impact there.
Yeah, so like back to early April, I mean, it was the biggest that I've ever seen. In one day we lost like 50 to 60 basis points. I think during COVID, the biggest was like 30. Over the span of that week, we lost 100 basis points, which is a full percentage.
Yeah.
But then like the next day, it swung back 60 basis points. And it was like, nobody knew what to do because nobody could wrangle the market, right, and know exactly what was
Market like stability.
right, exactly.
So
The parameters, I would like it to insurance. Nobody wants to use it, but they're sure happy they have it when they need it. And during that time when everybody had to hit the pause button, everybody was very happy that they weren't forced to go into the market because you'd be at the whim of whatever somebody was bidding.
We need
Would the district have the opportunities, understanding, and I think it's getting all that sort of ducks in a row together, right, is really critical, right? But knowing the craziness of the market, right? People are expecting something in June, right? Maybe in September, but then again at the end of the year, right? If you got there and you said, what, June happened or it didn't, right? And it would get pushed off, right? We have the opportunity to pump the brakes in anticipation of that next drop, right?
Right.
Or if they said, okay, June and September, we're gonna do it, right? We're gonna go June, September at the end of the year on rate cuts.
Yeah, and we actually experienced just that on the funding last year. If you remember, I think there was like a conversation of the following week was the Fed meeting,
Right.
and the decision was, well, if they cut there, are we going to miss out? And it actually went the other way. They did cut, but the market, I guess, it swung back the other way. It swung back like 50 basis points, like directly after they cut. So, you never know what the market's going to
That's
do.
every time.
Right.
Got you.
as long as it's lower than what we're paying now and we recapture the amount, that's,
You're right.
and having the conservative numbers in there at least gives us a baseline of what to expect or not.
yeah, so Tom, the short answer is absolutely, we can pump the brakes. I would, and this is not a political statement, but we obviously know kind of with more certainty what the Fed does. What is sometimes even more impactful on our rates are the unknowns when it comes with announcements on trade tariffs or announcements on global policy, things of that nature. Those seemingly can happen overnight. And really, either throw a wrench into things or be great and have a great impact. So we can certainly manage the knowns or what we think are the knowns,
Sure.
but sometimes those unknowns are even more impactful anymore.
The only thing that's certain is the uncertain.
Correct. Yes, sir. Yes,
That's
sir.
the taxes, right?
Yes. Mhm, right.
My recollection was right on, I remember saying, hey, you know, let's look at that.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they're smarter than I, so the right thing.
Do we need a motion to move this forward? We want to do one just to be safe, or?
You can make a motion if you'd like to. I think that this is just a, you know,
Sort of an FYI.
all right. We're committing to,
Right.
right? I shared the idea of the refinancing in our weekly update to the board.
And I haven't gotten any questions, have
Right.
you?
So, no,
Yeah.
I think the thing that will need a motion probably is the,
Authorization to proceed.
Right, so the next finance committee meeting will be seeking your sort of approval and confirmation that yes, we're gonna move forward and they're gonna start doing the work.
Yeah, I see the authorization to proceed on the 12th, so.
And even that doesn't obligate anyone to anything. That's just the informal nod for us to start, you know, exactly, get the ball rolling on everything.
No.
Okay,
all right,
anything else,
It's a
gentlemen?
win-win.
Excellent.
Everybody else good?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
you guys appreciate y'all's time.
I say enjoy the lovely weather.
Exactly.
I swam here.
A nice sunny drive home, right?
Nice.
Yesterday, this
My
time.
pool fell down last summer and the frogs are back this summer and I'm like, okay.
Thank you so much.
All in the rain.
Thanks. Good day.
All right, take care, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right.
So on the budget?
Yeah, so, FY '25 and budget update. So okay, so as we've been sharing, sort of update on the revenue through April. As we've talked about, sort of working in the current year-to-date numbers, and then we will include, as we do in our budget updates, the most current forecast on those numbers as well. I think as I type on my, in the back of my mind, I feel like I need to create some other story, but the story seems to be the same. So these slides haven't changed much.
But I see 113% on the federal. Did we get more money than we anticipated?
We
That's
did,
the
and as we talked about last year, right, it's really the ESSER piece
Yeah.
is the more, right?
Yeah,
So it
that's-
was really the closeout
Right.
of the ESSER grants that produced that change, right?
It's gonna be back to.
ESSER grants closed out. We lost a little bit of money on the title funds when they did their final in March, so we dropped a little bit. But that's been here, and I think we've been targeting and talking about that for each of the months. I think the state, I think we're really sort of locked in on the state numbers pretty tightly, so we'll see if that holds true. The difference in the state is primarily the change in the budget, right? So the impact of the new budget was worth about $300,000 at the end of the day. We're ahead by 400, so I think we were pretty on track on that. The local side, as we talked about last month, there's a lot of give and take in the local numbers. Obviously, the increase in taxes is the biggest driver to our overall success. Everything else is going to be relatively flat. Certainly when it looks at money, right? So these pictures all look the same, but the difference between this picture and this picture is less than $1 million. This to this is $3 million, right?
Yeah.
So while graphs and pictures sometimes look good, the reality is it is just a picture and it's relative to what's next to it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think all of those are the case. I think the earned income tax is strong. I think it is coming ahead That along with the transfer taxes is gonna come in ahead of budget, which is good. There's a number of things that are gonna be below the budget, which will be not good. I did reach out to Keystone again and got an updated number earlier this week that I'll put into the budget in anticipation. So they're estimating, they'll estimate your EIT going forward, and they're estimating that to be 7.6, which is 7.65, 7,650,000, which is a little higher than we had in the working model. So trying to get most of the current updates as we go forward through that.
Now, we say $400 ahead of prior year. That doesn't mean we're getting $400,000 more from the state. It just means our collection from the state so far is $400,000 more.
The 400,000 is in prior year. Yes. So yes, you're correct. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I just don't want anybody looking at that saying, well, they got an extra $500,000 from the state.
Right. But we did, we did get, as I said, when the budget was finalized, so.
But in last year's
Right,
budget.
Right, so last year, right, so this is probably prior year end budget, right? So we looked at it, when we budgeted, we probably budgeted a flat on the state side, right?
Yeah, I think we did, yeah.
When the special education number came in and the basic ed number, we got juice on that, that moved that number up. Okay? This continues to look at revenue. Again, it sort of breaks it down. You can see the FY '24 year-to-date amount through April, where we are 2025, and then how that compares to the budget. For these, the general revenue year-to-date totaled 127 million through April of 2025, which is 3.6 million more than the prior year at the same time. Again, largely driven by real estate taxes. As you look at them, if there's any other comments of merit there, value, as we talked about to Mr. Goodixon's earlier question, the Fed piece is really the ESSER closeout. And it was great to, I continue to read and continue to hear some horror stories on the clawback with the closing of the Department of Education, right? If it wasn't for Vera, I would have been one of those guys seeking an extension, right? But she worked tirelessly to organize
So much great.
and to get those final FERs in, which was really, in the delay between Beth Cruz leaving and Vera coming in, there was 3 months of work that was sort of piling up. I didn't tell her about that. She should have asked that question. I should ask it next time. But she really did an incredible job at organizing that data and information to make sure that we were ahead and on target. It was, and I know at the same point last year, we were at 87.6, we're at 84 what does that say? 84.6, a couple of percentage points before. Mr. Godexon, you talked about, sort of where we were against the budget at the last meeting. So I added that as a bullet point just to give us a frame of reference. So we're a little bit behind this year on the revenue collection compared to the budget.
But then again, most of that is state and federal. It's not local.
Right.
We're fortunate our local
But it's
connections.
money that's coming.
It's money that's coming in.
Right. The federal is probably is I think earlier pointed out, right, we're ahead, right? We're a little below on the state, but the state, it has its calendar and it will catch itself up. We're 93% of the budgeted number on the local side.
Yeah, I mean, you're 2% of.
Right. So, of things that will be coming, so that we'll continue to get EIT and record EIT probably for the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, we had talked about that,
right?
And then
So that's
back
the
in
one that will continue to move, right? And you can see it's in here, it's at 60%, right? Whereas the other ones aren't.
Yeah, you look at
So
it, it's
those
2%
taxes will
different.
come in later, right?
Yeah, you look at it, it's 2% difference. It's $3 million and our EIT is $3 million.
Right.
And I assume you can anticipate some transfer taxes as well.
You will. The accounting for it, right? EIT, you'll be getting EIT that's for June into the beginning of August, right? And we will continue to account for them back. Transfer taxes, there's sort of a hard line in the sand, right? You get to the end of the month,
Yeah.
you're done, right?
Yeah.
So end of June, you don't have that same sort of accounting process that you do with EIT. All right? This is just the top 10. Last time I showed where they were. The only two that changed this year are the bottom two. And they just switched places, right? So our share of the Social Security recovery, I think stayed the same because we didn't have a filing in between, and the transfer tax nudged up a little bit.
Okay.
You see something?
I was gonna say, can you read?
Oh, wow. Sorry about that.
No, it's worth a try. Go up one.
There we are.
No, I meant go up to 90, not 80. There we go, thank you.
On the expense side, general fund expenses are 110,845,000 through April, which is certainly is more than through the same period last year. A lot of things play into that. Year to date difference is really driven, as we've talked about, professional services, which is really our special education, our then labor and benefits, right? I think the labor side is a product of a few new people that were added at the beginning of the start of school year based on the elementary enrollment numbers,
Yes.
as well as some special education support in those same numbers, right? So those are the numbers that are at play. I think the benefit math, I'm not sure I got a good number in there in my own work. So I think we're gonna lag and we're gonna see that in the projection as well.
So a question, I mean, I know, on Tuesday we approved the IU budget of 8 million.
Yep.
How did that compare to what we approved last year?
It's less, right? It was significantly less than what we approved last year.
If you look at the one seats,
Yeah, well,
one seats were lower. Yeah.
I just didn't know, but I got a couple of questions that said,
No.
that's an astronomical,
No,
But that can go up.
Right, so
If we have a half a dozen students that move in, we may have to buy 6 more seats.
It is what it is,
Yeah,
right?
no, it's-
Ultimately, you pay for it. Now that the IU has adjusted their accounting, you pay for it in the same year that you're gonna make that decision.
I mean, and you look at it too, we spent close to $1 million on special placements as well. We had those
So-
4 or 5 resolutions of, yeah.
Our
So
accounts,
it is what it is.
sort of hold it.
Yeah.
So as we've been watching those placements, whether it's at the IU or anywhere else, they have been holding, right? I think we've actually lost another student, so we're doing a great job. Special education is doing a great job. And it all comes down to what we're going to forecast. So we looked at that budget. I worked it with Dr. Ross, and particularly as we looked at the contract, right? And I said, I'd rather be a little light, right, than not have enough, right?
Yeah.
Or have too much,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
instead of having that $2.7 million credit coming back to us, right? So we did drop that budget down a little bit. We're looking at other areas, as we talked about several months ago, looking at a special ed contingency, potentially to offset some of that, and whether we move anticipated expense into that contingency, just to get it out of that special ed number, right? There's a downside to that when you calculate charter school tuition, right? So charter schools think you're gonna spend that 2.7 million, then we're getting back. There's never a change
Yeah,
to
so-
that,
so-
okay?
okay.
So those are the areas.
Yeah.
We're at 73% of our expenses. We have, in this 2 months and change to play. But knowing that in June is your highest payroll because you have the summer payout, and we accrue, for those who get paid out during the summer, we accrue all the teacher contracts back to June, which is their contract is a 10-month contract. And, saying in graphs, these get a little hard to see. It does show the current year and the prior year. this looks at where we stand, expenditures by fund between the budget, the projection, and the actual. And, the difference, I think the actual is pretty close,
Substantial.
obviously, right? This is our forecast. Again, I think the revenue numbers seem to be right on track. On the top side, right, with 300,000 of the 400,000 coming on the state side, just based on knowledge we didn't have in June when they budgeted that in July, and the difference then in our ESSER funding with a little bit of a drop based on the change in title funding. The expenditures, I think, to me, they look pretty straight, pretty on track, a little more or less in certain spots. But it has the salary number carried out as well as a higher benefit number. Overall, it's a zero. We're short $25,000. This does include, just to make sure we're caught right, it includes that transfer from the general fund from the debt service to offset the deficit that we had projected originally, right? So that was a part of last year's plan. We had a move from debt service as we plan to do, I think, going forward to the general fund to make whole our refinancing, right? So last year we were going to save around 250,000. We're going to add 250,000 so that there's a $500,000 reduction in expenses. We'll continue that. The balance of that is money that we use to offset the deficit, right? And as we talked about at the April board meeting, that number, we can maybe not make that move happen, not spend that, and look to recover the 2.7 that we're going to be getting back from the IU because we need it in this accounting window. That should clear the board, right? That'll keep us level.
Yeah.
And then if we need to offset next year as part of the 25-26 budget, we can use that at that point.
So, I
Unfortunately.
mean, I see that the salaries are in the red. Is that due to us hiring more staff than we anticipated?
It is, right? So as we talked about looking through April, right, we hired a couple of teachers coming in on the elementary side because of the process that we had, right? And again, we wouldn't have brought it up if we didn't think it was meaningful, right? But the board sort of rejected that out of hand. I think we've got to begin to look at areas. We'll talk about the budgets in a second, but we're looking at people and budgets and staff. The money's all in staffing, right? So we've got to look and make sure that when we're forecasting that one teacher, one person, one individual, one finance guy, right? Those all have an impact. Special education, as you know, right? Those are really required and mandated. But when we looked at some of those enrollments, right, we're looking at projections, whether that projection happens or doesn't, really comes back. So we'll look to have that, sort of potentially more transparent in the future. So that gets these last two bottom bullet points. Okay. On the budget, as I said, there's a lot in progress right now. So as I shared in the last Friday's update, if you had a chance at looking at that, I sort of laid out a new calendar of where we're at. We're finalizing the proposed final budget, which is the number and an Act 1 increase that we can't go below. Or we can't go above, right? I think that number, when you see it, is going to be 4% as we are moving forward. But that will look to bring that to the board meeting on the 27th. That is an important date. It seems to be the last two meetings, right? There's a lot going on. So, but it needs to be on there. And it needs to be approved so that the clock starts running, right? It'll allow us to get the final budget done by the middle of June, if we were so lucky. As the board meeting dates go that are on the calendar already, the June 10th, we'll be able to have any further discussion and dialogue around that budget. But we won't be able to approve it until the 16th. We'd have to add a meeting to make that date because you've got to be days away from when that May 17th.
Yeah, so it's gotta be
is, right?
posted for so long and.
Exactly. So we'll be doing all of that. So the next one is really that June 24th, unless we had an earlier meeting to move that forward. So that's sort of the work that we're doing. As I mentioned, the April work session, I didn't feel like we got a lot accomplished at that one. That one didn't seem to be as productive as one would have hoped. But we have been working diligently on the budgets. Is the feedback coming back is we want to see reductions. We are doing that across the board, all the school budgets, on the general expense side, not the labor side, but the general expense side. And is the slide that talked about where the money was and what you control. That's certainly the smaller pot of money, is we are reducing them across the board, except in cases like the IT, right? IT, we deferred our refresh. I can't defer it again, and I've actually need to pay for last year's refresh this year and do this year's refresh. So we're not necessarily able to get that 5% savings, right? We're working in other areas, really leading.
It's an aggregate,
on the group to try to get that down.
I mean, it's more of an aggregate than it is an actual.
Sure, and it's a bit, unfortunately, as you well know, right, things in technology are expensive, right? So it's not a small number,
They're
right?
all over the place right now.
It is, and talking about economics, right? I mean, it's really a volatile situation on the economy side. Okay, any questions with regard to that? And I think those are how it will ultimately play out. And, as we talked about in April, I think our deficit, if we moved the move from debt service to then, I think we were about 1.6 million, 1.4 million deficit. Including that, we're about a 4.3 million sort of operating deficit, which is the truer of those numbers, right? Okay. You guys have any brainstorms in the middle of the night? You want to talk about the budget? We're no longer sleeping. I am no longer sleeping. So let's, feel free, as any of the board, right? If you have an idea, certainly share it.
Yeah, we'll buy,
We can,
what's the,
we
let's
can
say,
look at that.
what's the Mega Billions up to?
Well, we
So-
only need one win.
Yeah.
We do need to, we will need to bring closure on that, the Act 93 agreement. I'm going to, send back around the questions that we had for the board. That's not getting any traction, so I'm gonna try to ask it in a different way,
Okay,
because they're really questions that you, the board, need to decide, right? They're not necessarily legal questions, they're positionary questions. And since we're not in the room having those discussions, what does the appendix that has a, minimum, mid, max mean, right? If someone's below it, do they get moved up to it? Those kind of things we need to hear from you so that we make sure that we're interpreting what you are committing to in real time, right? So that's when Dr. Wilson and I went through and asked those questions. That's what we were trying to get at. Again, an understanding from those in the room. I know you're
Yeah,
one of them.
my understanding was, whatever people were placed on now, mid,
Mhm.
those
Yep,
ranges,
yep.
and they were only for future employees.
Right, but that's an
get
important
some,
thing to know, right?
get
So
some
that your
clarity
own
in writing
employees,
to them on that.
but then your own employees will fall behind, potentially, right? So you'll show that, and current employees will fall behind, right? So they may be below the mean. And how do we manage that, right? We've also talked about the challenges of a flat increase committed to over a period of time, given the declining Act One. So we'll need to, at a full Act One, you won't be able to fund the agreement, the contract agreement. So all the other expenses have to sort of reduce themselves somehow. But that is, so items presented for information. We have these four, the PISLAF reports added in here, the Consumer Price Index update, which came out yesterday. as well as the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics informationally, which came out, the last one of those was April 30th. So that last report that we looked at in the budget discussions was a December number, just
Okay,
gives us the latest number.
right.
Areas to be approved that we'll be seeking your approval for, so yes,
So on the first one,
yes.
on the backup, it said 3,005,000, but we're coming in at 219.
Right, so it is actually.
Yeah, it's like 25-page document. I couldn't find it in there, but I figured I'd just ask.
Right, so
I mean, I like it.
the difference is a
Do within.
financing that we provide money to them. So
Okay.
that's the difference.
Okay.
I think if I look at the attachment,
Yeah, the backups originally, like the header on the backup said 3.3
right, so I think if
million.
I think I fixed it here and didn't fix it there.
Okay, that's
Make that
okay, yeah.
correction, right?
All right, yeah, 'cause I
This
see
is
the 3.
number,
Yeah,
right?
right.
That you had, I will make sure, so thank you for calling me,
Yeah.
I'll make that, and this is the breakdown.
I mean, like I said, I like to see it. I mean,
So
it's, you know,
Yep,
it's
no,
it's
no.
almost $1 million or $100,000 less,
So
so.
those are the numbers that we looked at, right? So this initial piece is the budget, right? It's 3% more than the last. This is 197, that's the lease rental debt that we have, that we fund each of the schools do. And then a prior year reconciliation, which is the 38,000. So NBIT in total, the number is $3 million. So we don't need to come back and approve each of those pieces.
Is NBIT floating any bonds that, you know?
No.
No, they're not. They're not, right? They,
Yeah, I
they
didn't
are,
think
this
they had
will,
done anything recently.
right?
And I
This will be, this doesn't include, this 3 million doesn't include the previously approved $120,000, which is the final capital installment
Okay,
from the districts, right? I was at MBIT 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Had a tour, we talked to them, and one of the things that, you know, that sort of their refrain, and I called it out in their presentations, right, is they want to be sort of the 7th centennial building, right? They want us to think of them as our buildings, right? So they are cracking through things that they're going to be spending money on, right? They've spent a good deal of the $8 million we had committed to them. There's a couple of key projects that they think they will be able to get done inside of that number. One that is more flexible is the electrical service coming into the building, that there is some concern about. But you know, their story is they would be considered one of everyone's, you know,
yeah, that didn't go
quarter
well with
share
Citizens Advisory last
of
month,
all of the
so
buildings, right?
I don't know how it did today.
So it's a tough one. We're sort of in a tough spot in terms of how that happens. Right now, all the schools ponied up cash up front. I think, I don't know if you were on the board when I don't think you were. I think we
Yeah, I think,
talked about it,
yeah.
right? Because I would have.
I think we did it previously in like
Yeah, you know,
09 or
That's
10.
To pay up front, you know, I
We were
wanted to
actually
finance
paying
that too.
every time.
Because it was at a time when
So-
interest rates were
Yep.
really low.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that 120 that we make the payment in July 2025, that's the next budget year. And that's the end of that contract. So,
But the one thing that did get, you know, is they did get 2 million to do all the HVAC units, you know, that's sitting on top of the roof.
yeah.
Which should help, you know, and not, you know, tap into.
Sure, they have
Sure, expenses.
money for that. They got money for some of the asbestos
Yeah, I mean, they do a good job looking for.
Yep.
For bonds
so
and
they've been
grants for
working
other
But it's still, you know, parking lot and driveway that.
Yeah, no, it's a long list, right? I'm glad they're making headway through it. And I'm glad they
Yeah,
have
it's a-
money left over, right?
It's a rolling
Originally,
list though.
you know, and I think things come on and off. You know, a year ago, when they were sort of in transition in their business office, right? We weren't sure if they were gonna, you know, to get done the list of things they needed to get done.
Yeah.
At the time, thought they were gonna go over. I think the concept of need changes, I guess, under pressure. So some of the needs maybe have fallen off. Other ones were added to it. So it was good to hear that was happening. So that's that number. The second is asking to have a procurement card issued to Lori Denny. Lori's our food service manager. She gets caught in some catering work that she needs to do or helping our caterer out. The caterer has a card issued to them. They've had it for, I think, ever, but that would be a help for her. The third one is a stipulation. This may or may not come to play out because they're in the final negotiations, but instead of having it drop to June and potentially the last meeting in June to approve, which could be a little dicey, I want to keep it on and, it's a draft today. We're working through it. And as that gets solved, I will let you know. As I spoke to Mr. Hartline the other day, we've had a number of tax assessment challenges that have reduced the assessment of late. This is one for the Lidl building, which is now the Tesla service station on York Road, right? This is a significant increase in the assessed value and the market value as that building has changed hands a couple of times in its recent existence. So we're anticipating additional collections of $238,000.
This is just a one-time.
It's into the future, right?
But
So
there is an addition.
we have a period that we filed our first challenge in 2020 when we first got going with this. So that 2020 for the tax years, 2019 through the 2024 year, right? Varying because that was still some period at that time, it was still just a parking lot with a building on top of it, right? That market value didn't change, but it did change a little, right? There was assessment was 361, it went to 551, right? So you can see where it was and where it went to at the bottom. At the end of the year, right, the change from where we are, right, it's plus $71,000 in this upcoming
And that's
school year, right?
an annual increase.
And it would be that going forward.
So
Okay.
basically it's half teacher.
Yeah, so that was a great win
Seriously.
for us, right? And
It is.
it is, it's also offsetting a declining number. I think, as I mentioned to you, right, our assessed value as a community, I get a report regularly. That number has been going down. So this is a good lift in the right direction. Okay?
Yep.
The next one is, these are ones that we do each year. So we have participation in the joint purchasing programs that we have every year. And our last is the RFP for musical rental equipment. Okay? Yes.
Does it pay us to rent them? I mean, or is the type of thing where we need to start looking at maybe purchasing to buy them?
I think
know.
we do. This one is for students, right? That we're negotiating for them.
Okay, so this is
That
the
isn't them.
music arts or whatever.
We are continuously.
We're just setting a plan up for students to.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
There's
the
no
$45
cost-
that one I was
cost to
paying
us, right?
for.
No cost, because it's paid by the families, right? So
Right.
I always wanted to be a saxophone player. I had a brother of mine who played the trombone. He played it until he bought it, right?
Yes.
My parents paid enough and he bought it, and then he didn't play it anymore.
And we
Right, so
roll
it came
from-
down to me 2 kids later, she's like, nope, how about a guitar? I have one of those you can borrow, right? So,
Yeah, and we rolled it from one instrument to another till we ended up on a trombone. So,
right, so,
yeah.
that's the final.
Yeah, that wasn't
one
okay.
we're looking at. But we do and have been investing in instruments for the school.
Right, because I knew that we did
Much
it at the high
larger,
school and, right.
Continue to make sure that marching band has their equipment and their
Yeah.
tools to go.
Yeah.
So we'd like to get a motion to approve those 5 and bring them forward to the board to vote on at the committee of the whole meeting.
I will make that motion.
And I will second it.
All right.
Saying our next meeting is the.
Next meeting is June 12th. We will have bond counsel here at that meeting. That will have May's updates, financials through May. We'll also then have where we are with the budget, so we'll be able to be talking about that and getting your feedback. And again, if you have any thoughts, feedback relative to the budget, I'm all ears. Districts certainly do approve budgets with deficits in them. But there's only a limited period of time that you can continue to do that.
We're in the same spot we were last year.
Yep, no,
I mean,
you are,
it's,
and
you know,
you're in the same, then you're sort of even with the world, right?
Right, exactly, but I don't
That's
like
one
being
thing.
even with the world.
But again,
The numbers that we are projecting from the state are pretty much the same,
Yeah.
we could again, a little bit more
we are,
What we
the forecast on where the budget
forecasting.
is now
now.
and what we're getting from the state, as well as what we're getting from the Department of Education and PASBO, it is flat, right? If not down a little bit.
Yeah, unless
Compared.
there's some
Something
legislative
happens
move.
that's significant.
Yeah.
There are schools getting increased money,
But
right?
it's not us.
But it's not us, right?
I mean,
It's unfortunate.
If they manage to push something through for charter schools, if they manage to push something through for a significant special ed change, but right now, everything is in appropriations, nothing's moving.
The only thing that I think you have a chance at is the charter number, right? I think there's been enough
Well,
bad
bad for that,
publicity
yeah.
with regard to charter schools and the allocation of their funds that have people scratching their head and saying, hey, this isn't necessarily right.
Right.
So maybe there's a cap on special education costs, right? So if they cap enrollment at 8,000, as the governor proposed, or at 10,000,
Yeah,
those are numbers less than we're paying today. That would be helpful.
keeping in mind too that we still also provide services to those students as well.
What's that?
We also provide services sometimes to those students as well. Even though they're in a charter school, we still provide some services doing
They get driven to school.
Yeah, so like,
We drive them
we
to
still
school.
drive them to school, we
get
still-
some funding.
yeah,
for
there's
that,
still
but
some,
Charter schools are different than if I was homeschooled, right? Or if I went through CDLA, right?
Yeah.
Charter schools are in fact their own school, right? So you participate in athletics within your charter school, right? You graduate within your charter school.
right,
You don't go to the William Tennant prom because I live here, but I go there.
Right.
It's not, I think you go to school,
that's
go to your
homeschool
prom,
instead,
right?
yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Those are differences in that relationship, right? Charter schools are all licensed, certified schools in their own merit. The only thing that we are doing is funding them, because that's how the math was put together back in the 70s when they didn't know any better.
Yes.
right? So
And lack of
change.
Transparency and reporting. Okay,
All right.
alrighty, so motion to adjourn,
Second.
Awesome.
thank you all.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.